For some, that help will come in the form of disaster aid money. Our special assignment unit discovered just because FEMA gives that money to you doesn't always mean you get to keep it. One local man is being asked to pay back more than $12,000. Here's investigative reporter Eric Flack.
For Gregory Allen Jr., the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is a four-letter word in more ways than one.
It's so painful. You know, like I've cried so many tears this year. I called the suicide hotline, and I haven't done that ever.
This is a massive storm. The hurricane-force winds extend out 100 miles.
Floodwaters rushed over New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Allen's school, Xavier University of Louisiana, was covered in 4 feet of water. The damage so bad, school leaders had to postpone the fall semester. 1 out of every 4 students left and never came back.
I lived in anarchy. There was no government. You know, like I couldn't go to school. Like, what could I do? You know, if I would have stayed in New Orleans, like I would have died.
Allen moved to D.C. to be with his twin brother and enrolled in Howard University. But without the scholarship money he had at Xavier, he stayed on course for a degree in biology. But the memories of what happened haunted him. He says he was diagnosed with PTSD, and the financial pressure of trying to start over only added to his stress. So he turned to FEMA.
So they asked, like, what did you have? What did you leave down there? Like, what is missing? And like I told them, you know, and 3 weeks later, they like cut me a check.
Allen got around $10,000 in disaster assistance, which he says he used to pay for on-campus housing, a new computer, and new clothes. We asked him for documentation on all this, but he told us any receipts or copies were lost or thrown away years ago.
So fast forward, FEMA gives you the money, they help you get back on your feet.
Yeah.
You think it's all good?
I think it's all good. You know, like I'm working, I'm doing better, I'm like an adult, I'm having a good time. You know, it's like 12 years later at this point, and I get a letter from the Department of Treasury.
This letter, it said 12 years after the hurricane, the government wanted its relief money back. The letter said Allen owed FEMA $12,203. That's the $10,000 the agency originally gave him, plus a 28% penalty assessed by the Treasury for having to collect the money.
You see, FEMA said it had been trying to track down Allen since 2013 and that they had sent letters to 2 addresses and a former employer trying to locate him. Allen says he was moving around from place to place, changing careers, and didn't know that FEMA wanted its money back until that letter from the Treasury showed up earlier this year.
It said the government was going to start garnishing his wages and force him to make restitution.
FEMA decided that the funds that they gave me, I was ineligible for. I lived through Hurricane Katrina, but I'm ineligible for these funds. Like, I lost everything, but I'm ineligible for these funds. I have PTSD, but I'm ineligible for these funds. Like, I don't even understand how they just arbitrarily chose this.
Allen called both FEMA and Treasury and couldn't get anyone to explain why he was ineligible for the relief money. So we decided to help him get some answers. We started with the only phone number we had, the one on that letter from the Department of the Treasury. They said they had no idea why FEMA wanted the money back and sent us to something called the FEMA Recoupment Hotline. It's a special hotline set up specifically for people who have questions about why FEMA is taking back aid money. At the time, Hurricane Harvey had just hit and Irma was on the way. So we expected to be put on hold. But as time dragged on, Allen's patience, already tested, wore thin, and so did mine.
This is painful.
Yeah.
All to get some information about why they want all their money back.
Yeah, I mean, the waiting game continues.
2 hours and 9 minutes after Allen first called, the elevator music stopped and the line went dead. Allen never even talked to a real person.
We weren't giving up, so we spent weeks calling and emailing FEMA on Allen's behalf. So many messages back and forth. They filled up my inbox.
Finally, FEMA told us if we sat by the phone on a Friday night, they would call. So we waited. Again. This time, 2.5 hours passed before the phone finally rang.
The big explanation from FEMA? They weren't supposed to have given relief funds to college students through the avenue that Allen took. Not that he didn't necessarily deserve disaster aid, he just applied for it the wrong way, and FEMA didn't catch the mistake. If there was an error made, does FEMA bear any of the responsibility?
Oh, I think they should bear the entire responsibility, because it's like, they're the ones that gave out the money.
FEMA wouldn't agree to an on-camera interview, only a statement that said FEMA reviews disaster assistance payments to ensure those payments have been properly awarded and appropriately spent, whether through human or accounting errors, duplication of benefits, fraud, or other reasons. Assistance sometimes goes to individuals who are not eligible, and it gets worse for Allen. Since FEMA already transferred the debt and it's now in collections, he can't even appeal the decision anymore, and the check garnishments have already begun.
And for this to be the outcome it's a slap in the face. It's a slap in the face of being a young citizen trying to better yourself.
Allen now worries hurricane victims in Texas and Florida will one day find themselves in the same boat. A lifeline offered, then reeled back years later.
FEMA and the Department of Treasury may think this is over, but we don't. I've submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for all the documentation in Gregory Allen's case, and he's signed a special waiver that forces FEMA to release it to us. When we get that, we're going to know more about why FEMA made this decision and if anything can be done to reverse it. We're staying on this, and we're going to let you know what happens. Eric Flack, WUSA 9.
FEMA did not respond to our questions about how often this happens, but federal oversight offices said after Katrina there were between $600 million and $1.4 billion improper and possibly fraudulent payments. In a 2011 report to Congress, FEMA said it had drastically reduced that problem through new checks and balances.